In my hometown of Salem, Oregon, each summer, usually late June or early July, there is an annual art fair, which is held in Bush Park, which is this very large park in the center of town. This park is located like walking distance from my family's home. The art fair is a major event that everybody looks forward to. It has live music, cultural features, and educational opportunities. This whole interactive kids section where the kids can create. There are theater performances, concessions provided by local restaurants and food trucks. We're not talking just like corn dogs, we're talking good stuff. And then there are rows and rows and rows and rows of artist booths where you can purchase just about any form of tactile art you could possibly imagine. There is like textile art and paintings and pottery and sculpture. There's wood carvings. There are stone carvings, jewelry, mixed medium art, weird Pacific Northwest yard art. If you have not been to the Pacific Northwest, you're probably not sure what I'm talking about. We recycle everything and make it art and stick it on our lawn. There's floral design, there's all kinds of stuff. You name it, it is there. You will find it. Recent years, they've moved the art fair to September, mostly to combat the heat, because even in Oregon, July be hot. This year is going to be the 75th anniversary of the art festival. For as long as I can remember, this art fair kicked off each year with a children's parade. Any child who wants to participate, and their parent or guardian who helps manage the mayhem, is welcome to come. Kids can dress up, or they can just show up. You don't have to have a costume, although they are highly encouraged, as is decorating your bicycle or your wagon, because many children either ride in a wagon or ride their bikes. What was always extremely discouraged were the perfectionist parents who did everything that they could to create for their child so that it was all super matchy-matchy and like, you know, perfect. So the people who like dress their kid up in an astronaut costume and then turn the whole wagon into a spaceship, kind of missing the point. Because the point is for those kids to create and to express themselves and to have some sort of external, joyous expression of their personhood. So every year there's always a couple of those over-the-top parents, but for the most part, people get it and they just let their kids do whatever. So naturally there were like bikes and wagons with old birthday decorations. Some of them might be banners that say happy birthday because, you know, they're pretty and rainbow. There's crepe paper streamers like up the yin-yang because back in the 90s, I don't know, they seemed to give birth in people's homes. If you wanted to decorate, you could probably find some crepe paper at your parents' stash. Balloons, super tacky, hard to read signs that children had created that said something that was important to them, but you couldn't really read it because it was in kid handwriting. There were costumes, and basically these costumes would be like, you know, you took your favorite parts of the last 4 Halloween costumes you had and put them all together. And then you grabbed some Mardi Gras beads, a feather boa, a cape, and some sunglasses, and like, you were ready to march in this parade. That's what most of us looked like. We had the most random outfits. Some of them were probably downright hideous in hindsight, but we certainly didn't think so at the time. We all thought we were fabulous. I mean, we got an entire parade to ourselves, so obviously we were borderline local celebrities. The number of people who show up to this parade to cheer on those kiddos is unbelievable. I don't know what just happened. We're gonna go with this one. Okay, that was weird. I don't know. People show up en masse, like in droves. Hundreds and hundreds of people line a very short parade route because it is a children's parade. It's not like it's going on for miles. Just to cheer and wave and encourage and celebrate the beauty of what is happening in that moment and what is to come, which is the art fair. My brothers and I looked forward to this parade every year. As I got older, I looked forward to it less because as a teenager, I kind of was aware of how like embarrassing parts of it were. But because my younger brother is 8 years younger than me, I still got to be in the children's parade because he didn't want to go alone, and my parents voluntold me I was doing it. Often wearing things that he picked out for me, which were extremely special. This parade was and is like the ultimate hodgepodge of mismatched randomness that you could imagine. It's extremely loosely organized. Whoever shows up, and you get what you get. It is led by some adult clowns at the very front end, and that is about as organized as it gets. And if clowns aren't your jam, you just stay far away from them. There was just something, and is something, so infectious about it that people continue to show up year after year to see this parade, and kids show up year after year to participate in it. As I kept thinking about our gospel this morning, images of this children's art fair parade kept coming into my mind. And I think it's because on Palm Sunday, we're commemorating a very similar parade. It wasn't organized. It wasn't super put together or fabulous. It just sort of was what it was. Jesus and his disciples are making their way toward Jerusalem. As they approach and they're near Bethphage and Bethany, Jesus sends 2 of his disciples ahead to get a colt from the village that they are approaching. He tells them that if anyone asks what they're doing, to just tell them that the Lord needs it and everything will be fine. This exact scenario plays out, and somehow no one questions that these 2 randos are just taking a colt that doesn't belong to them. When they get back, Jesus gets on the colt and rides into town, followed by the disciples. Now, people had either heard that he was coming or they just sort of stumbled upon his entry, but more and more and more people came out to see what was going on. And they threw down their coats on the ground for the colt to walk on and cut branches from nearby orchards and vineyards and waved them and threw those on the ground as well, shouting, "Hosanna! Blessed is the one who comes in the name of the Lord. Hosanna!" This story is depicted in all 4 of the gospel narratives. Each is slightly different. Mark is the most concise and includes the fewest details, which is pretty on brand for him. And in a few of the others, there's a little more that's expanded. Jesus has a run-in with the Sanhedrin because the Jewish temple authority and political leaders didn't really like this display much. We always refer to this as Jesus' triumphal entry into the city. But many commentarians note that it really wasn't actually all that triumphant. At this time, most important people who entered a city would have done so with some pomp and circumstance and glory, riding on animals much more highly valued than a colt, and then would have been received by the city's elite. How many of you have seen Disney's Aladdin? Imagine, for those of you who had, where Prince Ali is coming to try and woo Princess Jasmine, and there's elephants and camels and monkeys and peacocks and servants with treasure and all of that stuff. Okay, that was super over the top. It wouldn't have been quite that extensive, but still along those lines of what most visiting dignitaries and powerful leaders would have come along with. Certainly much more than one dude riding on a colt with some scraggly, rough-around-the-edge disciples following behind him. Amanda Bropst-Renard wrote this of this Palm Sunday anti-extravaganza. She says that Jerusalem was likely already preparing for the Passover observance to outnumber the residents of the city. Josephus indicates it is their custom to slaughter a greater number of sacrifices at this festival than at any other, and an innumerable multitude of people come down from the country and even from abroad to worship God. So the city needed to prepare for increased sacrifices in the temple, more people to feed, and the need for places to stay. One can almost imagine the smell of unleavened bread wafting through the city streets and the unmistakable barbecue-y scent from the temple sacrifices overtaking the city. One can also imagine bumping into people as the streets swell with crowds, not being able to see what exactly is going on, not being able to understand all the languages spoken, the orders of the Roman soldiers who are patrolling the streets, who were likely brought into town from elsewhere for increased security measures, and the energy of the celebration. Amidst this joy, energy, and likely frustration and confusion, Jesus rides a colt into Jerusalem and is celebrated with shouts of Hosanna. So often we read the Bible as if everything is by necessity and design. Most of us do not expect to laugh or to be delighted. But this scene is hilarious. Jesus instructs his disciples to steal a colt. It may be effective to cast the story in modern terms to gain a sense of what's happening. Go into the city, and you will find there a car with keys in the ignition. Bring it here. If anyone questions you, tell them, the Lord needs it, and we'll bring it right away. We promise. How many of you going to give up your car to some random scruffy guys who tell you the Lord needs it? Yeah. So the text would lead us to believe that the disciples calmly walked up, untied the colt, and returned to Jesus, who successfully mounted and rode it. Craig Keener explores some of the practical aspects of the disciples successfully cajoling the colt and Jesus riding it. Donkeys sniff humans to distinguish friends from strangers, but the disciples that Jesus sends for the colt are undoubtedly strangers. Bringing the colt to Jesus could thus pose an initial challenge. Even a young horse may react to a new potential rider by fleeing or seeking to protect itself. Perhaps, as Keener suggests, this colt cues into Jesus' identity and is divinely inspired to comply. There is, however, room for faithful imagination here. How did the disciples who stole the colt tell the story to the others? What would the disciples have done if the donkey balked on the path? Did the donkey balk on the path? Donkeys can be stubborn. Jesus here bends the expectations of the normal. And in this bending of our expectations, there is humor and there is joy. Jesus riding a colt into Jerusalem may mark another reference to Zechariah, which celebrates the coming king entering Jerusalem on a colt or donkey. Again, it is important to bear in mind that Zechariah's words refer to their own historical context, but that, as with other prophetic texts employed by the Gospels, the Gospel authors reinterpret and reframe these texts in the light of Jesus. The crowds respond as if they understand the allusion with shouts of Hosanna and celebration. It is unclear who these crowds are and what exactly they believe about Jesus. Are they the ones who have followed him throughout his travels? Are they pilgrims visiting the city from afar? Do they think Jesus is the coming king? If so, what gives them that impression? He has yet to teach, preach, or heal anyone in Jerusalem. And if this crowd believes that Jesus is the coming king, then how do these shouts of Hosanna and blessing give way to crucify and condemnation? In recent years, the church has often told both the Palm Sunday and the Passion story on this particular Sunday. We do this because not everyone can make it to church for Good Friday services, and you cannot have resurrection without first having death. I get this, and this is okay, and sometimes we do it that way here. But sometimes I think it almost cheats the significance of what Palm Sunday is and what it was like in that moment. We breeze past the celebration and just jump straight to the sorrow. That OG Palm Sunday parade was hodgepodge and small scale, yet whoever the people were who participated, we don't know, but they participated. Excuse me. The people showed up. I would imagine they were probably a mass combination of everyone that Amanda Bropes Renaud named. And these people cheered, and they sang, and they quoted scripture while waving branches. They threw down their coats, which is a massive sign of respect, by the way. Most of those people only owned one coat, and they were willing to have it trampled on. And let's be real, probably way worse than just trampled on, because parade animals seem to poo more than any other animal out there. I don't know what it is about marching in a parade, but then they gotta go. Yet these people didn't seem to care. They wanted to show their support and excitement and hope for the future. They put down some of their most valuable possessions and let Jesus walk on it. It was kind of like the children's art fair parade. Nothing about it made sense, yet everything about it made perfect sense. It was hodgepodge and rinky-dink and weird and random, and yet beautiful and awe-inspiring and hope-giving, all at the same time. In her book, Circle of Grace, Jan Richardson has a blessing poem for Palm Sunday, and I'd like to end by reading it to y'all. This blessing can be heard coming from a long way off. This blessing is making its steady way up the road toward you. This blessing blooms in the throats of women, springs from the hearts of men, tumbles out of the mouths of children. This blessing is stitched into the seams of the cloaks that line the road, etched into the branches that trace the path. It echoes in the breathing of the willing colt, the click of the donkey's hoof against the stones. Something is rising beneath this blessing. Something will try to drown it out, but this blessing cannot be turned back, cannot be made to still its voice, cannot cease to sing its praise of the one who comes along the way it makes. Blessed is the one who comes to us by the way of love poured out with abandon. Blessed is the one who walks toward us by the way of grace that holds us fast. Blessed is the one who calls us to follow in the way of blessing, in the path of joy. Amen. Now look, I would not preach a sermon and reference a children's parade where we dress up in amazing things and then not have a children's parade. So I would like to invite all children, young and old, who would like to participate in the parade to come forward right now. Come on up. I'm going to get costumes. I'll be right back. rest of church might be a little noisy.